Let me tell you about Otis. Or maybe I should start by telling you what I've thought about Otis all along. I'm very much aware that people like to talk about the miracle. And yes, I've dangled my feet off the dock and into that pond myself. But I'm speaking as someone who knew Otis, or who knows him, or who, air quote, knows him. And therein lies the whole problem. Now, as a general rule, I hesitate to employ the words fact or truth, because there's simply too much selling of saints' bones and angels' tears under the aegis of those otherwise felicitous terms. However, in the case of Otis, I am very sorely tempted by them, given that I was, as they say, there. So we have an obligation to cleave to reason in this good life, and though the seductive force of miracle can be powerful indeed, I am of the firm conviction that rationality must and necessarily will triumph over superstition, sortilege, and whatever other manner of hocus pocus you care to throw at it. So yes, he came. I saw it. And yes, he also left. Now, there's something about leave-taking that has the stench of the grave about it. And it's only right that we respond to that dread, and respond to that with dread and an unflinching line of defense. It's not without justice that the period I'm referring to is also known as the rapture. But you may comfort yourself with the sobering thought that this is not about Otis alone, but all of us, leaving as a kind of death. Dixit. In fact, it was Otis himself who wrote these pretentious words: "When the leaving begins, the living ends." Doesn't that blow your mind? This is our nightmare. We're all just happy little verbs, living and loving away, until suddenly, wham, we turn into fucking nouns. I feel that I should confess my discomfort with Otis's near constant cursing, as well as with his enthusiastic use of the vernacular. I know that my sentiments are of little import, but I trust that they will lend credibility to my claim to be reporting the man and not the myth. Some of you might appreciate the difference. And in case you suspect that I'm meandering, let there be no doubt whatsoever that we are talking about Otis, the one who left, and according to an improbable number of fervent souls, the one who returned. So, what happened in the middle? Well, that's the prickly end of the cactus, as we say out here in the dry lands, and to speak plainly, it's kind of the whole point of this exercise. As an insider witness, a confidant, and, dare I say, a participant in the arrival, departure, and rebirth of Otis Arsenian, I am here to offer some sorely needed clarity. So let me begin. Otis came from Armenia by way of Constantinople, as he enjoyed calling it. It is said that he traveled the length of the Black Sea's southern shoreline in an old Welsh coracle. In the port of Istanbul, he caught a steamer which churned its way to Tenerife before cutting a scurvy path windward to New Orleans. There he signed on as cook on a northbound riverboat. Except that this is the 21st century, and there are records. So I know that he actually caught a bucket shop flight to Chicago, rented a Cherokee 4x4 on a pilfered Amex Black, and he headed out on the highway. But whether you prefer the Fantasia or the Verity, I can attest with certainty that Otis made his scene-stealing entry into our lives by being spewed from a monster dust devil in the Albertan Badlands. As photographed by a team of quick-reflex paleontologists, yours truly among them, he was leather-helmeted, begoggled, and slung beneath a fuchsia-covered paraglider decorated, for no comprehensible reason, with the face of Casper the Friendly Ghost. He landed his outlandish rig at our feet in the 105-degree heat, quite tangled in the Gore-Tex and nylon, but with his right hand outstretched and pointing at the open notebook on my knee, saying, "Hey there, buddy, I see you're getting this all down. That's great. And you folks, you've all got cameras. You're hired." That is, assuming you want to change from, and he did a theatrical sweep of the arm, "all this shit." Well, when he wasn't just being profane, Otis was in the habit of speaking elliptically and, dare I say, incomprehensibly. What, for example, did he mean about verbs and nouns? I really have no idea at all, and I'm rather sure that neither did he. But I do know that, for Otis, words were inconsequential compared to acts. So nobody should have been surprised at what came next. Immediately after he had unbelted himself from the contraption, he marshaled the assistance of our crew to gather up the bits, then tipped his chin upward to the genuinely fierce sun and whistled to it for a cab. "People," he announced as he removed his goggles, "get ready to rock and roll." Otis slept with 3 of our staff in the first week alone. And I have a strong suspicion that by the time of the rupture, I was probably the sole person among us, man or woman, to have been spared the dubious delights of that recreation. They all sang hymns to his prodigious artistry and endowment, but I've served in the camp's first aid clinic, and I can attest to the energetic spike in venereal disease that spread in his wake. Call me a prude, but I prefer my organs with the pipes intact. As an adherent to the Gnostic injunction to know oneself, I am aware that my reticence might have got the better of Otis's libidinous drive. Yet there is a common twist in the human psyche that wanting a thing is not a prerequisite to wanting to be wanted by it. And I'm no exception, so he could have at least pretended to want to get into my pants. True, he would not have suspected what awaited him, but such is the burden of my discretion, I bear it by choice. On the other hand, it may be that as Otis drifted down from the sky on that scorching Alberta day, the sight of me with my notebook inspired in him a vision of my mission that preempted any carnal desires that he would quite naturally have felt. This seems probable to me. Do I flatter myself? Perhaps. But be that as it may, I was instantly adopted into my role as his amanuensis, there to scribble and scribe to his heart's content. I will add parenthetically that bearing witness to his dalliances was where I drew the line. Given his druthers, I'm quite sure that Otis would have had me at the foot of his bed with pen and paper, transcribing every sigh, squelch, and squeeze. And I like to think that posterity, by which I mean Otis's guileless partners, will be grateful that I have remained discreet on that front. To return to the day in question, we helped Otis collect the bits and pieces of his glider, which had not survived the landing, and we quickly determined that the best course of action was to call it a day, pack his rig onto the roof of the Land Cruiser, and get him back to camp for a checkup. We did not know the man, but so to our unpracticed eyes, he seemed quite crazed, and we suspected a concussion and a case of shock-induced hysteria. I do believe that he did not shut his mouth the entire 10-mile drive out of the eerie sandstone pinnacles of the hoodoos. "Will you look at those things?" he exclaimed. "Makes you wonder what Mother Nature was high on, am I right?" And he poked his neighbor hard in the ribs, that being Terry Rebus, varsity middleweight boxing champ, and if you did not break your elbow on his case-hardened torso, he could easily have broken it for you. Curious thing was, though, that despite being possessed of a trophy-level reflex counterpunch, Terry took the jab with nothing more than a grin. "Oh, wait, no, I've got it," Otis said. "Mother Nature set the scene, but the high is up to us." Terry seemed to find this comical, and he stifled a smile as he ducked his head and quoted dutifully, "No drugs or other illicit substances will be permitted in the camp on pain of dismissal, sir." To which Otis responded by throwing his arm around Terry's shoulder and hugging him delightedly, while continuing his breathless commentary on the scenery with great satisfaction. It was an unusual ride with an altogether unusual man, but then, unearthing the unusual is our profession. We took it in stride. The track into camp is resolutely lunar. Believe me, we've done our best. And we bounced rather violently past the sorting sheds, the volunteers' tents and latrines, and then, to Otis's distinct excitement, past the fair weather showers. Our most recent addition is a Quonset hut that serves as field office in season and doubles as secure storage in the unworkable winter months. As we pulled up in front of it, Otis was out the door before we'd come to a full stop. He's looking in all directions and grinning in a most affecting manner. "You people," he enthused, "you really know how to get it on." In reality, our camp was a scattering of cinder block, canvas, grey stone, and dust along the slope of a barren valley. It was severe and desolate, and many found it morbidly depressing, though I always found it soothing and, in certain light, genuinely spectacular. We numbered 30 or more inhabitants, depending on the year, and being chronically underfunded, our staff was accustomed to getting by with a minimum of comforts. This season, though, we were running at full capacity, and space in the sleeping tents and sanitary facilities was at a premium. Our young interns tended to live in a kind of prelapsarian state, ungroomed, uninhibited, and unthinking about either of those things, but the current conditions put some pressure on even their bohemian sense of privacy and modesty. Having arrived, it was at my suggestion that Terry Rebus took charge of the newcomer in order to hustle him directly to the infirmary. Now, Otis was an impulsive person, but that enthusiasm tended to belie his impressive powers of observation and analysis. And during that brief march to first aid, he must have made a comprehensive assessment of the camp. The bustle and teamwork? Check. The general robust cheerfulness? Check. The, if I may say so myself, exquisite organization of it all? Check. And he'd certainly not failed to take in the charms of the interns themselves, who, I think it is fair to phrase it this way, disported themselves quite happily in their cut-off shorty shorts and tank tops, tanned of leg and shoulder. I recall Otis attempting to shake himself free from Rebus, possessed by an urgent impulse to mingle with the young troops who were lining up by the showers. "Let go of me, you big palooka," he insisted, and in that moment I observed something of interest. In Otis's reflexive response to containment, I saw a fierce need for liberty, and I cannot deny that the display of such raw animal dignity caused me to swoon inside, at least a little bit. For his part, Terry held on to Otis with adamantine resolve. "I'm afraid that's going to be a no-fly zone for you, sir." "Well, at least let's have a drink then," Otis muttered, giving up on the interns for the nonce. Who knew that riding dust devils was such thirsty work? And he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a silver flask, which Terry instantly appropriated, intoning, "You know I can't let you do that, sir." Otis groaned. "You'll pay for this, you lumbering lummox." But I got the distinct sense that he was not particularly disturbed at all, and this prompted me to accompany them to the infirmary, where, as it turned out, a physical examination revealed nothing in the least untoward. No thanks to Otis himself, who squirmed throughout the affair like an 8-year-old in Sunday clothes. The nurse practitioner, Irina by name, an exchange student from Lviv, who'd already seen it all, laughed out loud when the question of Otis's stability arose. "Stable?" she laughed. "He's not even what you call sane." With the follow-up, "But fall from sky is not doing this. I advise watching your ass." All of which, of course, Otis heard and loved, and he attempted to pull her into a bear hug, but that drew such thunderheads into her regard that he satisfied himself with a, "Thanks, sister. You sure act like a tough nut, but you're a peach inside." Beyond the infirmary is the south entrance to the camp, at the end of the gravel road from the 2-lane blacktop by which our regular visitors arrive. That is, those who don't hang glide in from the Badlands. We strolled down there to complete the tour, and Otis paused before a placard by the gate. With feet planted apart and fists on hips, he read it aloud as though he was revealing a sacred text in a lost language. "Welcome, interns. Our field camp is basic, but we make up for that through community. Showers and decent restrooms are always available. The fire pit is for evening socializing. Mobile devices may be recharged in the evenings after peak hours. Tents sleep a maximum of 4. Please respect this. Happy bone hunting." If you knew Otis and his untempered libido, then you will suffer no shock in learning that he actually snorted out loud at that last line. I know. Men can be so drearily predictable. Yet, his very next words did come as a real surprise. "You know something? I lost my parents when I was only a boy. It wasn't very pretty." He paused and cocked his head, scrutinized the path back up into camp. "No, it's such a beautiful day. I'll spare you the details. But thing is that when I take all this in, all you people, well, it occurs to me that I might just be able to build myself a whole new family right here." As fortune would have it, I was once chosen by a feral kitten. She came out of the fallen stones of a ruined house in a village on an island in Greece, trotted up the unpaved road towards me, and jumped straight into my hands. It was completely unexpected, and utterly disarming. And that is precisely what Otis had just done to us. He was feral, he was hungry, and I still flush at the words today. He chose us. Thank you.